I'd like to make a video now talking about some common objections people have to a gold standard or some other metallic form of money. And I don't do this because I'm an explicit advocate of a gold standard, at least as the term is commonly used. I definitely believe in market money. If people decide not to use gold or silver as money, I don't think there's any way you can really argue with that. But some of the objections against it are pretty poor, and I thought I'd touch on at least a few of them. And the most basic one I've heard is that, quote, there's not enough. And this belies a basic misunderstanding of the role of money in an economy and how it functions. Because theoretically, anyway, we might make a practical consideration, but theoretically, the quantity of money is neutral. I'm not exactly sure uh, where this fallacy comes from. Um, but a lot of people seem to think, and I'm not, again, I don't know, this isn't in any textbook, this isn't something that even the apologists of the state even really claim, but they seem to think that for every single material good in existence, uh, there has to be a corresponding quantity of money. And so they'll say there's not enough. If you add up all the houses and tools and books and cars and all the goods, you don't, there's no, um, and then you say, well, one car is worth 1 ounce of gold, and there, if you add all the stuff, it's more than there is gold. And they seem to think that, well, this shows how it doesn't work, and it's a really weird idea, because first of all, the paper money that exists in the world doesn't equal that either. There isn't a paper note for every uh, good out there. I guess hypothetically there could be, because you could just add zeros, but that's certainly not the case. The people who print the money aren't always, calculating how many goods there are and saying, okay, well, we need to make sure we have uh, a denominated quantity for all of them. They don't do that at all. They just pick a certain amount of inflation that they like. In the last couple of years, it's been not even that. They've just been printing money whenever they thought it would be expedient, without any kind of attempt to have some kind of specific quantity available. Um, Part of it, I think, might be that people take analogies to money too far. So people will say, well, uh, money is the lifeblood of the economy. And I guess that's an okay analogy. I don't, I think it's good that it emphasizes the importance of money, but there's a problem with it. For blood to work, every blood cell can only carry so much oxygen to your muscles. And if you don't have enough blood cells, it'll not carry enough oxygen and you'll die, or at least be harmed. Um, Money doesn't carry a certain value. The amount of value that a money can be used for changes. And so, unlike a blood cell, if the amount of blood in your system was halved, that wouldn't mean that the remaining blood can now carry twice the oxygen. Uh, and that is exactly what happens with money. So uh, there's no question that you need a certain stock. We don't need, and I remember having extensive debates. This one guy, I forget his name, he had his YouTube channel, uh, saying we have 4,000 tons of gold in the United States, and that's not enough. And I would say, well, how much is enough? If we had 10,000 tons, would that be enough? Well, he doesn't really know. He couldn't really say. And if your position is that a certain quantity is necessary, then you theoretically should be able to say how much would be enough. And the fact that you can't says that uh, your theory on the quantity of money is faulty, at least at some level. If you can't give any estimate of how much would be necessary, uh, the now one thing that I do understand is the idea that money is supposed to have stable purchasing power. People do believe that money has to have some kind of fixed value, and I can certainly understand that. The claim is it's easier to make calculations with it, and that's obviously true. If something has a This is true for any commodity. If it has a fixed value that never changes over time, it is easy to do calculations. However, nothing has a fixed value over time, money or any good. It's actually impossible to have such a thing. Everything is always going to be either going up or going down in value, relative to any particular good, relative to certain goods, relative to all goods. There's no magic substance, certainly not paper, that retains an identical purchasing power at any given time. We're forced with the situation that it's going to be changing. Now, the less it changes, the easier it is to calculate, and obviously if it changes too much, it becomes impossible. And of course, that has happened before, but to my knowledge, never with a commodity money. It's happened with paper. Whenever you have hyperinflation, it gets to the point where calculation is so hard that it doesn't even make sense to attempt to use it. But then again, I've never heard of that happening with gold. Even the supposed horrible gold inflations of, say, the Spanish Empire were pretty tiny in comparison. You're talking maybe 2 or 3% inflation per year, which isn't all that horrible, really, compared to what's typical even in less inflationary paper currencies. So the fact is that there is no such thing as a stable price, in the sense, at any given time, the amount of corn available is going to change relative to the amount of wheat available and the demand for either. And so there's never going to be a ideal ratio between the two, and this goes for between any other good, including gold or silver. And so I think that argument is pretty fallacious, because there's nothing that meets that standard. There is a practical question here, because you could hypothetically, since it is neutral, we could say, well, we could have just one gold coin. If we only had 1 ounce of gold, it's hypothetically possible that could be used as currency, because we would just divide it up, and even a single coin divided up will give every human so many molecules of it. How that could be divided, it would be pretty difficult. In the digital age, it wouldn't be that hard, but at the point where your redemption would be nothing. I mean, if you could go to the bank and say, I like to redeem all of my gold molecules, and the redemption amount is 1,000 molecules, that's not even a speck. So there is a practical limit, but the practical limit is far, 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 far below where gold is, and certainly silver as well. And it's just, I don't understand. Like the other the thing is, people say it's deflationary. So what? That's good. If my boss offered me an option, he gave me three options. One would be like he could pay me in something that loses purchasing power, an inflationary medium. Supposing it was possible, although it's not, suppose he could offer me to pay me in something that has completely static purchasing power that never changes, and a third commodity that sees rising purchasing power. Which one would I prefer to be paid in? There's no question at all. I prefer the last. And that's not just me. That would be anybody. It doesn't even matter how low your time preference is. You could have the highest time preference in the world, and it still makes sense to accept the medium that has an increase in purchasing power. And I think that's a reasonable expectation then, that since almost anybody is going to value that more relative to something that's losing purchasing power, that medium is going to be chosen over inflationary alternatives. Usually, unless there's some other, if it's plutonium and plutonium deflates, but it also gives you cancer and kills you, then I suppose that would be something that might offset that. But it's possible, but I don't see it as plausible in most situations. So so in your day-to-day life, all it would mean is that you'd probably be getting paid. You'd see deflation, and you'd probably see your money go up in value, and you'd see prices going down. The only real big, huge, and you'd be buying and selling just like you do today, and probably you'd be using a credit card or a debit card that was just denominated in gold, and you wouldn't even necessarily have to hold it. Although if it didn't have redemption, the potential for abuse is so great that I think redemption would be pretty common. But the one thing it does do is it puts a severe strain on government, because then the government can't inflate the money supply, which is how they pay for everything pretty much. And so their only way that they would be able to fund things would be through taxation and borrowing, and that would severely curtail their functions. And if you read history to the back in the days when gold and silver were the primary money, uh, the functions of government were much curtailed and so different in their scope as to be almost unrecognizable. I mean, you'd have kings like saying, "Well, I can't. I have to wait till the taxes come collected at harvest time to even be able to, build my palace or even field an army, because I don't have enough money in the meantime to even pay the soldiers." If you read anything about military campaigns, soldiers were almost never ever paid. That's why they were always ransacking and looting, and because that was basically they get their first paycheck, which would get them into camp, and then they were very lucky to ever get paid again. Not in every situation, but often enough. And that just strikes the modern person as really bizarre. But that was how governments had to function, because they didn't basically have money on tap, which is what they have now. And contrary to what many believe, the fact that government has money on tap is not a good thing. So, which in and of itself is uh, a good enough reason to favor switching to some kind of metallic money. All right.